Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, a morning cougar hunt in KC. A little different than a Saturday night at chances are, but what's it going to take for the Red Raiders to get a win and survive in advance in the Big 12 tournament? We're into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? We'll take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at nissanusa.com. With the only Chris Level joining us from Kansas City, I'm Casey Cowan, and depending upon when you're taking this episode in, well, adventure just around the corner because this is a game day edition of Locked On Texas Tech, conference tournament style as the Red Raiders and the darlings of the Big 12 tournament, the BYU Cougars, set the square off here this Thursday morning from KC. Opening ball game for Texas Tech. Obviously, BYU has a win in their rear view over Central Florida. We'll get to the matchup that's coming up. We'll look back to some previous things we learned in the first matchup between Tech and BYU, Chris, and also make a pit stop to take a closer look at how BYU dispatched of Central Florida. But I wanted to kick off our conversation today really with something I didn't quite anticipate or didn't necessarily have on my list. I think it took you arriving there and kind of taking a look around you for this to really set in. But you commented to me in a conversation we had whenever you got to Kansas City just how much had changed in the matter of a year for Texas Tech basketball. And here's the good news for Tech fans. We're talking about change for the better, right? It's changed for everybody, I guess. Nothing stays the same, but quite a different feeling for the Red Raiders or Red Raider fans showing up to this conference tournament.
Yeah, I just, we stay most years we stay at the downtown Marriott, and that's where a lot of teams stay. It's kind of a short 10-minute walk to the arena, and there's always a lot of activity at this hotel in the lobby, and you got teams coming in and out and all that, and you never know what you're going to get into every year when you get here, like coaches coming and going, who's had a really good year, who's had a bad year, whatever. But as we got here, I guess it was now, 2 days ago or a day and a half ago, I guess it would be. It was just so in my face that when I left this hotel a year ago, how uncertain everything was in your program. And nobody knew anything, player, coach, or anything like that. And as we got here, I think you kind of see the West Virginia contingent who had just lost when we got here, and they flew out. I guess it would be Tuesday night, and now that we're talking now. I mean, obviously the announcement's been made. Hey, we're not going to retain Josh Eilert and all that. But I don't know if in my wildest dreams if I would have thought when you left this hotel a year ago that you would not only get it flipped so quickly, but you would be in such a good spot as a fourth seed, because but those are somewhat rare, and it just kind of was an in my face moment. That you're right. It's just like I was getting like the whole deja vu thing. Like, oh my gosh, like a lot has gone on, and we talked about how much better things maybe have been this year, but this was like really just like I guess that's the best way to describe it. Kind of an in your face moment that. With the right hire and the portal and all those things, you can flip these things quickly, but it's much easier said than actually done. And it wasn't too far ago where like a team like West Virginia had this thing rolling and all that, and now their program is just like very much uncertain. And that's just the example I'm giving you, but I just and like I remember when we left, Baylor was about to play maybe, and I had I think Baylor's team room was right next to ours, and I'm just thinking like you just beat them this past week, and Anyway, it was just kind of wild to think about, like, how much different things are showing up here this year compared to when you left here last year. I mean, it couldn't be more opposite ends of the spectrum, because you were the program that everybody's kind of whispering about and kind of going, man, I wonder what's going to happen there. Who are they going to hire? Because, technically when we showed up here, the head coach and Luke Adams, they were not here. And then you played the one game, you lost. And I think Mark actually stepped down, whether forced or not, the semantics at this point, as we were here after that game. And then it was the next morning when we departed. And so then we land back in Lubbock, and then everything just kind of everybody goes their separate ways. And anyway, so I thought it was interesting to kind of come back here and in a much better, much calmer, much more stable place with a bright future with this current head coach and staff and roster.
Yeah, kind of like a year ago coming in under the cover of darkness, and today you're coming down Main Street, or this week you're coming down Main Street with the sun shining bright on the Red Raider basketball program. I think, what we had, I guess we were under the Corey Williams administration at that point in time with an interim head coach there in that spot to hit the Big 12 tournament with. And everybody knew that Tech was riding the whirlwind, so to speak, but nobody knew how things were going to shake out whenever the dust settled. And I think while we anticipated change, or whether it was roster or coach, which we didn't know for sure, but definitely there was going to be a change, big change, a part of the offseason, whether it was just the roster and the coach would have stayed or whatever was going to happen. So unsteady, probably the feeling there as you go to the conference tournament. And I got to tell you, not only did we see that change, but as you just pointed out, you show up there in the position that you are this season, being a successful basketball team as far as the regular season is concerned. So that change well beyond, I think, our wildest dreams. I would almost, want to guess as a fan as well that it might have been a little easier to just say, all right, well, we got to turn over a roster. So there's going to be a lot of change with the players that we see on the floor. It's like, okay, you'll probably find some players, here or there that can do some things. But I mean, you turned over the program to the extent that now you feel like you have a future, right? I mean, I don't want to be like too big picture here, but there have been some folks comment in the YouTube comments in recent days, being excited about the future with Grant McCasland. And I've responded to some of them saying, I'm excited to feel like there is a future, with Grant McCasland for this basketball program. So how far you have come in what seems like a short amount of time, though I know some of those days were probably long, is quite remarkable and quite fortunate. I feel very lucky as a Tech fan that you were able to kind of regain your footing to the extent you have in just about a year's time with some high hopes, whether in this tournament or when we get to the national one.
Yeah, and as long as you can keep your nucleus together, which is a bit trickier these days than in the past, obviously. But because it's just funny, and I go back to the West Virginia example because I actually had somebody from West Virginia go, man, I sure wish Huggins would have screwed up, right now as opposed to a year ago, because I guarantee you our athletic director would have called Grant McCasland, knowing that he's the one that hired him at North Texas and all that, and they're still, fairly close and all those things. But I'm like, man, sorry, you're too late. But your loss is Texas Tech's gain. So, but yeah, I do think, we go back to that all conference team, and you see those sophomores on there, and Pop and Darion and all that. You obviously want to keep some of this nucleus together for sure, then tweak it and add to it and all those things. But yeah, there'll be some expectations if you can for this team coming next year, as will there be expectations for the opponent that you're about to see here in a few hours, because they've got some pretty good underclassmen as well, that if they can keep those guys together, they're going to be heard from as well. They won't be the old BYU Cougars won't be picked 13th in the league next year, I can assure you. Yeah,
no question. And just speaking personally, I was quite thankful as a Tech fan for the timing of Bob Huggins' aluminum recycling spree. He decided to go on that day. So thank you, Bob. I think all things shake out that way for a reason. Before we get to Tech and BYU, Chris, let's get to what BYU just made happen their last time on the floor. First, this week's March Madness bracket highlight brought to you by our friends at Nissan. Each week, we're picking one team that's standing out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. And some are saying the Utah State Aggies, obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team absolutely surprised everyone with a powerful performance against New Mexico, giving them their first outright Mountain West title in program history. They say, win life, go Rogue, and that's something apparently Utah State has taken to heart. Now you take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them all out today at shopnissanusa.com. Let's get to what BYU just made happen their last time on the floor. That was an 87-73 win over Central Florida. Knights did show a little life as the game went on. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they got into, a couple possessions difference as far as the score was concerned, but wind up as a 14-point loser. It was ugly early. Like, I thought, okay, Central Florida may just go to bed first 10, 15 minutes of the game, and this will be over, and BYU's cruising to a restful evening before they prepare for Texas Tech. Now, again, 14-point margin, so at the end of the day, the issue was not in doubt for long, but BYU did their BYU thing, man. 33-point attempts. They knocked down 14 of them, just over 46% from beyond the arc. And they put on a show. And I think what I see from BYU really, man, they play with great effort. They really play hard. And I don't know that there's anything necessarily I look back to in that first game and say, well, Texas Tech was able to take advantage of a team that was giving up the ghost down the stretch or anything like that. I think Tech made that happen. But what I was seeing from BYU in that ball game, aside from some great shooting like we expect, was a team that really plays hard and plays with a great level of intensity.
Yeah, in Central Florida, that's their problem is that Darius Johnson scores, I think, 32 points yesterday, and it's just not enough. I mean, I think they got down 14-0, as you mentioned, early in the game, and BYU pretty much controlled it. I think it was 59-56 at one point in the game, and so, Darius Johnson starts making all these threes, but they just had no other, scoring option. And if he's not shooting pull-up threes or kind of forcing those and they're not going in, they just struggle to keep up with a team like BYU. That's been Central Florida's problem all year long, is that they grind it out, they guard, they're long and athletic, but at the end of the day, they just have a hard time scoring. Whereas BYU, on the other hand, geez, I mean, they don't have anybody on the floor that can't score. This is one of the most fascinating stats I've ever come across when covering a team, I guess, but I can't remember if I mentioned this to you the other day or not, but I'll repeat it again for those that may have not heard it. But BYU is one of either 2 or 3 teams in the country that has 8 different players on their team that has gone for 20 or more in a game this year. That just speaks to how many different guys they have that can score and put pressure on you. And it's not just with the threes. And surely, don't call me Shirley, they can't make 14 threes in back-to-back days. That's difficult to stop. And if they make 14 threes again, you're going to be in serious trouble. But I think if you can hold that to maybe 7 or 8, more manageable, I love your chances because you're going to make some threes as well. But 14 threes in a neutral site setting like this that's just hard to overcome, and it was just too much offense for the Knights to ultimately keep up.
Yeah, no question. BYU, I don't know, man. They kind of seem like, live by it, die by it kind of basketball team. Not the first to sort of be that way, but, man, when they're living by it, things are looking really, really good. And I do wonder, not that there's a whole lot of solace to take from a beating like that, 14-point win, and think, well, there's the chink in the armor that we can find for BYU. But there is that little fact that it got down to 3 after a hell of a start and quite the first half for BYU. Remind you of anything that we saw in Lubbock not too long ago? And I'm not so sure that maybe if it was not UCF, if it was a Texas Tech or another team, they maybe couldn't have taken advantage of trimming that margin that close and made it a different kind of finish. Don't want to take any credit away from BYU, but there is some hope in that you continue to force them to live by it, that maybe they're not going to do it for 40 minutes or through the extent of a tournament. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it does, and they are going to be heavily reliant on the 3 ball. That's what they want to do. They're a volume 3-point shooting team. I think Mark Pope wants a variety of guys out there that it's just a threat to where those guys your Jackson Robinsons, your Spencer Saunders, Trevin Nell. I mean, some of these guys are all in the upper 30s or 40% kind of percentage range. And I do think, one, it's really hard to make that many threes in back-to-back days. The sport is that difficult. I just think it's very hard to rely heavily on it like they do and then live to tell about it consistently. But it doesn't mean they can't pour them in again today and maybe it catches up with them tomorrow. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that you're going to see them shoot 30-plus threes again, this morning. And you just have to keep it – you just have to, at some level, contest them. I think they have guys like, a guy like Dallin Hall, he's simply trying to get into the lane and then hope you suck in on him to try to stop the ball. And then the shooters are taught to fan out, and then he just kicks it out. I mean, that's kind of their offense in some ways. But if you start pressuring the three-point line, that's where they get you with the backdoor cuts, and it's just constant movement. And they just feel like they're going to outwork you, and you're going to kind of get lost a bit and all that. And that's where open threes come. Or because if you remember in the first half, Cowan, against Texas Tech the first time, that game goes to halftime at 48-32. And you're just like, oh, this is a lot. This is a problem. But you kind of figured out the pattern. You kind of started to figure out a way to be real physical with their ball screens and be real pressure the ball. And it took you a bit to kind of figure it out. But once you did, you kind of flipped it because, what's crazy is 48-32 at the half. Okay. And then you score 53 on them in the second half to their 30.
Right.
I mean, which is wild to me, that you could be down 16 at home and then still figure out how to win. And not only did you win, but you won by 7. I mean, yeah. Now granted, it was thanks to Pop Isaacs, who had maybe the best game that we've ever seen him. 6 threes, he scored 32 points. And this is typically what BYU does, just like with UCF yesterday. They start off like gangbusters, and then it kind of wanes a bit, but they just throw these haymakers initially, and some teams get knocked out. And you just have to realize, and Grant said this in a media availability yesterday, it's a 40-minute game. We have to realize that it's a 40-minute game, and these tournaments, it's the TV timeouts are longer, and there's a few more of them, and you try to play it segment to segment. Play these 4-minute spurts, and only worry about that. And if you can stack up enough 4-minute spurts where you've kind of beaten them, then you really like your chances. You just can't, you can't freak out if they come out and they make their first 5 threes or anything like that. And you've obviously seen this and had some success against these guys. But keep in mind, man, this is a BYU team that's got a lot of motivation. They're trying to play to get to Salt Lake City. You beat them the first time. They've kind of talked about that in their camp, that they're very motivated to get another crack at Texas Tech. So this is not going to be easy at all. But the best thing for you is because the data shows BYU being so good on paper, if this is a game you were to drop, it's really not going to hurt you much. But, boy, if you get it, if you win it, boy, I think it could give you another bump like the Baylor win did.
Yeah, this had to be one of the more frustrating losses for BYU of the season. As you mentioned, a 16-point deficit at halftime, then get outscored by 23, or the Red Raiders outscore them by 23 in the second half to win it by 7. Tech only led the game for 6 minutes, 7 seconds. Out of the entire ball game, they finished like gangbusters. As you mentioned, Pop Isaacs goes off down the stretch in the second half. BYU was 10 for 20, I think, in the first 20 minutes, and then 3 for 19 in the final 20 minutes. So maybe you do figure out that pattern a little quicker. I mean, not everybody, look, you said, kind of keep them close there. Not everybody can keep it to a manageable 16 points at halftime. I understand. That was maybe credit to Texas Tech. But I don't know. Do you think that there is, as you see on the screen, their first matchup lessons, is there something that Texas Tech can take from those final 20 minutes you described that is maybe figuring out the pattern that can be applied here early on? First, today's episode brought to you by Amazon's Fire TV, your destination for sports, from live games to highlights and beyond. Fire TV offers incredible viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick, which you can just plug, boom, right into your existing television. And you got access to millions of movies and television episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the upcoming college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. And that's not all. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from all of your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV or Alexa devices. And if you haven't done it already, you don't know what you're missing. Trust me on that. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Today's episode brought to you by eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has you covered with everything you need to maintain your vehicle and keep that ride or die ride on the road. Or if you're just looking to elevate your car's game to the next level of performance, they got what you're looking for with roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, superchargers, and accessories of all kinds to fit your style. Whether you're looking for speed, power, or design, eBay Motors has you covered with over 122 million parts to perfectly fit what you need. So just head over today to ebay.com/motors, where you're going to always find exactly what you're looking for, and with no risk because of eBay's guaranteed fit. Your part is guaranteed to fit just right every time, or your money back, keeping you burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to keep your ride or die ride on the road and moving your life forward at ebay.com/motors. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions do apply. Is there something that Texas Tech can take from those final 20 minutes you described that is maybe figuring out the pattern that can be applied here early on?
And I think a lot of it is something we saw in the second half of that game, and then maybe what we've seen recently with Texas Tech being just much better on defense. And I think it's about physicality. It's about, I don't know how these games are going to be called. I think for the most part, it's been pretty, that they haven't called it super tight. Okay. And obviously we saw one this past Saturday versus Baylor where it was called really tight. That didn't necessarily benefit you. I think you need to try to see how tight this one's going to be called, because I think the more you pressure BYU, the more that they struggle. And that's what worked for you in that second half in Lubbock back in mid to late January, is you really just didn't let them, because this sounds like an obvious. I had a coach say one time to a team, the best defenses just don't let, the other team run what they want to run. Well, thanks, Captain Obvious. But what you mean by that is don't let guys be good cutters, because you're kind of bumping them, knocking them off their spot, not letting them just roam around and get to where they want to go, cutting through the lane, knock them off, bump them a little bit and pressure a lot of those dribble handoffs and ball screens, and they've got to feel you. And I think that's what bothers BYU at times. It certainly did in that second half, but that's where really Texas Tech has been much better, I think, in recent weeks defensively in general. Is, look, you're not a great defensive team, and Grant will tell you that. But you are a much better defensive team, I think, right now than you were, say, a month ago. And I think that you need to continue to build on that. But I think it's about physicality, and it's about just not fouling or anything, but just, again, making them feel you a little bit. The other thing that I think you survived it in Lubbock, but you can't get beat up on the glass like you did back in Lubbock on January the 20th. It was a -10. I remember, talking to Grant about it after the game, and he was like, we've just got to get better rebounding. We just have to. We're not, and I think that, you saw the way they rebounded versus Baylor, who on paper is one of the top rebounding teams, not just in the league, but in the country. And I think that would go a long way with you. And it's tricky too, because long shots equal long rebounds. And so it's not necessarily traditional with some of these boards. It's not going to be like right around the basket. You're going to get some long, caroms and things like that you've got to kind of corral if they do miss.
Well, that's kind of interesting how that in some ways can, neutralize the Egyptian magician, a guy that's got a tremendous size advantage, but moves like molasses, and he's not, I think he only had 5 boards against UCF, had 7. He had a 21-point game now scoring wise against Texas Tech. So that wasn't too bad, but yeah, that was a game with Warren Washington in the mix for the Red Raiders, by the way, where they still out rebounded you by 10 and a double, by the way, here. Seen Warren Washington on the jog to the Continental Breakfast or anything like that?
Well, and like Traore and Khalifa, the 2 bigs that play for BYU, are very skilled. They are 2 of the better passing big guys that you'll see, especially Khalifa. And in fact, when he's in there, it's crazy because a lot of times the offense runs through him, similar to how Grant was using Warren at times, but prior to his injury, to where he's kind of the facilitator and everything plays off of him or through him. And he's a tricky matchup from that standpoint. I would say that it's not going to shock me at all if Warren gives it a go today at some level. I would say based on how Grant talked about him and the media availability yesterday, it's not a given. It's kind of like day to day. It's one of those things. And he was far short from saying, oh yeah, he's in. He's gonna play. It was like this is like game to game, day to day, practice to practice.
Nothing changed basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I, if I'm a Tech fan, I think I would be prepared for, a lot of what you've seen recently with just a lot of Robert Jennings and Emily Elaho. But again, don't be shocked if he runs to the scores table at some point and tries to, break the seal and kind of work his way back in a little bit. But I think that I'm prepared to say if he does give it a go, it won't be in the starting lineup. It'll be kind of in a reserve role and kind of, hey, give us what you can and let's kind of see what it looks like. And if it works, okay, let's get you back in there and give us a little bit more.
I've seen some in the YouTube comments, make the comment along the lines of if he needs more time to rest, if he needs more time, why even throw him out there in a conference tournament setting? Why not just wait until the national tournament? But I think that kind of goes back to what you've talked about, where they want a chance for him to get acclimated. So it's not just a throwaway conference tournament where you could say, yeah, don't even bother with him. If he needs more time, we'll save him for the NCAA dance. I mean, you're really wanting to get him into some sort of flow or rhythm, if it's even possible, before the NCAA tournament. So I know some fans have talked about, what's the use in even pushing it here in this conference setting. But I think that's probably it, right? We talked about that a couple of days ago.
Yeah, it is, Cal. And I just don't know if you want to do anything like that and experiment in any way in the NCAA tournament. I think you would if it just came to that, but I think that's a very tricky proposition, because your margin for error is gone at that point. Like you can't, it's just a huge roll of the dice. That's why we just kind of pointed to this past Saturday or now here in Kansas City to where you just want to break the seal. So there's something to build off of as opposed to like trotting him out there in whatever city you're going to be sent to next week and then kind of seeing what it looks like, knowing that, boy, it could work great, but it may affect everybody else negatively. You just don't know. And that's what you're trying to eliminate is a huge guess. And I think this is kind of I don't want to say it's a freebie. You're here to win, and you're going to do everything you can to try to win not only today and then stay here as long as you can, try to win this conference tournament. But if it doesn't go well, okay, you're going to live to tell about it, and there's still more to play for. So, again, it's just dicey. I don't want to make too much of it, but I just think that basketball people understand that it's an adjustment when you lose somebody, but, man, it's an adjustment working somebody back into the mix. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and it's not just a plug-and-play situation, especially for a big guy dealing with a foot or lower leg injury. A little bit different when you got, a surfboard for a foot as compared to someone of a different kind of stature. Yes. All right, man. Well, here we go. We're not too far away as we have this conversation from tip-off. Again, depending on when you're taking this in, we may have been closer. Or if you want to go biff with the almanac, you may already know the result on the other side of the ball game. Still glad that you would take the episode in. Chris, enjoy the ball game today. And hopefully we got another one to talk about on the other side, man. We're back for better or worse. Do or die season is now upon us, man. Feels good. Feels good to feel the rush.
I'm here for it, man. This is and it's going to be a semi-road game too for you, just so you're aware. And people that are going to watch this game from afar, this is going to be a semi-road environment. There's a lot of BYU people here, but to me, the last thing I'll say, you keep them below 10 made threes, you win. You keep them below 80, you win. Either one of those things, I like your chances, but you give up 80 plus or 10 plus threes, and I don't like your chances at all. So we'll see what we get, but the madness is here. Mr. Cowan, enjoyed the time with you, sir. I hope everybody enjoys some good day sports today, and hopefully it's a good day for the Red Raiders.
Heck yeah, I will mirror that, and also mirror by throwing in something that I think could be a key to the game. Pop Isaacs, score 32 points, and I'm going to feel great about our chance. You're right. That was one of or the best games we've seen from Pop as a Red Raider against this very team. So I'm sure that he's got their attention. Be curious to see what kind of day he has, and enjoy March basketball either way. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us out there wherever you may be. Make sure you get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts if you're not already, so you never miss an episode. And we hope to see you back here for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.